It's my pleasure now to introduce to you our leader, our founder, Senator Cory Bernardi. Whoa. So apparently, woo! Before Senator Bernardi comes to talk to us tonight, we're going to show a short clip because it is actually quite serious. I cannot read out his entire resume. It is too long. But he is the reason why we are here tonight. And I encourage you to watch this video together. Thank you.
Mr. President, I rise to inform the Senate that this morning I resigned as a member of the Liberal Party. When, as a younger man, I joined the ship of state, I was in awe of its traditions and the great captains that had guided us on our way.
When Cory Bernardi launched his new party right here in February, some saw it, and in 2 short months, he's made considerable progress towards something that resembles a challenge, a real challenge, to his former party.
The former Liberal has merged his Australian Conservatives party with Family First. More importantly though, he now has all of Family First's resources and infrastructure at his disposal to campaign in coming elections.
Family First disappearing, completely dissolving and becoming part of the strength behind the Australian Conservatives movement. This is a very big deal.
While the Premier was spruiking her housing affordability package just a few hundred metres away, clear signs that her house was cracking. Conservative John Ruddick, tenant Walter Villatora, President George Sabo, Ross Cameron and David Flint.
Victoria's upper house has joined Senator Cory Bernardi's new Australian Conservatives Party.
I think it is time for Australians to unite, the Conservative voices to unite, for the Conservative minor parties to unite.
In short, the body politic is failing the people of Australia, and it's clear that we need to find a better way.
Reported that your party, Australian Conservatives, which you formed in February, that you have now 10,000 members. Is that correct?
So we've got the infrastructure, we get people on the booths, we can get them how to hand out vote cards, but we haven't got that personality to lead the charge, and I believe Cory can.
With the political scaffolding in place, Senator Bernardi is now hoping to bring more talent into the fold.
Senator Cory Bernardi from the Australian Conservatives. Their website, conservatives.org.au. Bookmark it, check it out plenty of times. Join the damn party.
Are you touting for him, are you? Did you want some sort of commission here?
Here's the deal. If you are...
This is going straight onto my Twitter feed after this, so you know that.
Good luck,
It really is time for a better way, for a conservative way. It is a rich paradox where the established equips us for the new. And so today I begin something new, built on enduring values and principles that have served our nation so well for so long. We will be united by the desire to create stronger families, to foster free enterprise, to limit the size and scope and reach of government, while seeking to rebuild confidence in civil society. And every journey begins with a first step. Today, Mr. President, I take that first step, knowing the direction in which I will be heading, and I hope that those who are truly concerned for the future of our nation will choose to join me.
I now introduce you to our leader, our founder, my inspiration, and I'm sure yours, Senator Cory Bernardi. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I want to say thank you to Rachel. You're amazing. It's just wonderful to see you up here flying the flag for all of us. And Rachel, ladies and gentlemen, has put together these unbelievably qualified gentlemen to assist in getting our party started here in Victoria. I am humbled by it, to be honest. I'm sitting there going, is it only me? But would I like to hear more of Frank? He was just an inspiring orator. The sort of person who has a list of accomplishments that has decided to join Australian Conservatives, and without telling any tales out of school, but Frank, this is his first political... Kevin, I beg your pardon, Frank was today. Isn't that terrible? I was with Frank and Kevin all day today. Kevin has decided to join a political party for the first time in his life, and I am grateful for that. Is anyone named Frank here? No, all right. You're a legend, Frank. But with Adam and Neil, it is just incredible the people you have put together. And I'm in awe of it. I'm humbled by it. And I'm humbled, I've got to tell you, by Victoria, because this is one of our strongest states for the Australian Conservatives. And one of the great stories I love to tell is that we surveyed our membership and we realised the youngest person to have joined our party is 15 years of age. 15 years of age, it's wonderful. Needless to say, that's his first political party to join too. But at the other end of the spectrum, the oldest or the wisest or the most experienced person to join our party, also the very first time to have joined a political party, this month turns 102. And he's not with us here tonight, but in his message to us, he said, you know, my determination is to see the Australian Conservatives as the government of Australia. So he is now known as the most optimistic Australian, and I'm in awe of him. And I'm in awe of all of you too, because it was 6 months ago next week. 6 months ago, I had an idea. And I'm not sure if you realise quite how difficult that decision was for me to leave a party that I'd been a part of for 30 years. And it was difficult because you have to understand my motivation for joining the Liberal Party in the first place. It was Bob Hawke who inspired me. This is very true. I was at school, and this was at the early days of FM radio, for anyone I want to date myself, and the Prime Minister at the time was Bob Hawke, and he was doing tours around Australia to talk on FM radio and inviting youth to register to ask the Prime Minister a question. Now, not knowing anything about politics, I thought, that's me, I'm into it. So I registered, and I got a telegram from the Prime Minister's office that said, thank you, we'll be able to speak to the Prime Minister at such and such a time on, such and such a date. So I dutifully waited around, got on, spoke to the Prime Minister, asked him the typical 15-year-old question, which is, how can we get more young people involved in politics? I got the typical political response, join Young Labor, blah, 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 blah. Needless to say, I was chuffed and very excited that I'd been on the radio more than anything else. But to my eternal shame, a couple of days later, I got a telegram. And a telegram cost $7 to send. And if you were getting $2 a week from your family business, $7 was a lot of money. And it said, Dear Master Bernardi, I'm so sorry I couldn't speak with you, blah, 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 blah. Thank you for your interest. And I thought, but I did speak with you. How can you trust this bloke? And then, the day after that, I got the same telegram for the second time. So you can't trust them, and they're not spending the money wisely. That is actually a true story, and I realised then I wasn't one of them, I must have been one of the other team. And so I started to annoy my teachers. One was head of the Socialist Alliance, so I didn't do that well in that class, you can imagine. But when I left school, I did join the Liberal Party, not for any reason. I thought it was a community service. And I was like a lot of people, just happy to pay my membership and didn't go to any meetings, didn't do anything. And I went along a perfectly happy, sensible life. I managed to participate in sport and was in the Australian rowing team and travelled the world and was working internationally. And then a couple of things happened to me. One was I was in England and very nearly killed by being hit by a car. And it gives you cause as a 22 or 23-year-old young man, to take stock of your life and what's important. And I resolved then and there that I would go back to Australia because perhaps I'd seen a different side of life that I thought I needed to be dealt with. And so I went back ostensibly for my mother's birthday and never left. I bought a share in a business. My family was always in the hotel industry, and I bought a 50% share in a hotel. And over the course of working in that hotel, I started to lose a lot of weight, which is sometimes a good thing. I developed a bit of a hacking cough, and eventually I was coughing up blood for quite, a few months. And like a lot of blokes, you just thought, well, more cigarettes and booze would do it. That's the best cure. It didn't actually work. And one day, a doctor said, you must be depressed or something, go out and play sport. So I did. I went out and started playing footy again. But anyway, I was on the football field, and I went up to a guy at half-time, and I said, look, I think there's a problem. I've lost 3 stone in the last 4 months. I said, I've been coughing up blood for a few months, and I've got no energy. I feel really weird. And he goes, yeah, you might be a bit sick, Cory. And so he said, you should really go off for a test. And he sent me off for some tests, and it turned out I had tuberculosis. And I was highly contagious, so I was stuck in hospital within about 24 hours and in isolation for the best part of 12 months. In hospital and then outside of hospital, just stuck by myself in a room. The only person who was willing to come to visit is my now wife, so there was some good that comes out of everything. She doesn't have tuberculosis, but it gave me a lot of time to think and to take stock of what I thought was important. And I resolved during that time of enforced solitude to get more involved in community life and more involved in making a difference. And it sounds very trite, a lot of politicians say they want to get into it, make a difference, but I didn't want to be a politician. I had a perfectly happy life, had a good business, had a lovely lady that I was in love with. I had everything that the world wanted to offer me. But I decided I'd serve the community by getting involved in politics, because I do believe membership of a political party and public engagement is critical to our functioning and vibrance of our democracy. And so it is a form of community service. But every party likes a, bright, fresh face. And 2 years later, I found myself as the state president of the South Australian Division. I was 28 years of age. The words of advice given to me at the time were, by the time you finish this job, you'll never like a politician again. He was right. But I finished up as president. My first son had been born. I decided I wanted to spend a couple of days a week over the next 4 or 5 years with him before he went to school. My second son was born, it was the same thing. So I worked effectively part-time, I looked after my boys. And I continued to work and serve the Liberal Party as a volunteer. I had no aspirations to be a politician. At the age of 36, I was offered the role of the federal vice president. Not offered it, I had to go and fight for it like everything in politics. But I had some good pals, and I managed to become the federal vice president of the Liberal Party. And 2 years later, when my boys had just started school or thereabouts, they said, would you like to contest a Senate seat? And I did. And I managed to win a Senate seat. The reason I tell you that is because I resolved when I went into politics that I wasn't there to be someone, I was there to do something. And I wasn't going to tread lightly on the political earth. If they didn't like what I had to say, they can throw me out. If they didn't like it, they didn't have to pre-select me. I was going to fight for what I thought was important. And contrary to popular belief, what I had to say and the value stances that I took and the consistency that I brought to it and the principle that I brought to it was reflected in the fact that every time I went up for pre-selection, I'd get number 1 on the ticket, even though the numbers were with the other team. And I kept doing this and confounding them and making them angrier and angrier and angrier. And in the end, they started making me angrier and angrier and angrier, because I realised what we were doing wasn't working particularly well. I remember being brought up under the Howard era. And the Howard era effectively was 11 years of sensible and stable government, particularly when you compare it with today. And since that time, I've reflected on how have we progressed? Are things better today than they were during the Howard era? And the answer to that is no. However you want to measure it. If you want to measure it in terms of, do we have more confidence in our government? Does anyone trust government? So the question is, why do you want more of it? Why do you want more of what you can't trust? Do we think that our immigration program is working to our advantage? Do we think that the decisions taken in respect to green energy are working to our advantage? Do we think that the billions of dollars that has been thrown into our education system, reducing our numeracy and literacy of our students, is working to our advantage? And you can go through whatever metric you choose to ask. Ask yourself any of these things. How are we better off? And the answer is, we're not. The answer is that the experiment of the last 10 years, the revolving door of prime ministers, the 6 prime ministers we've had, the stalemate in the Senate, the lack of commitment and conviction and the preparedness of politicians to fight what is maybe unpopular but is the right thing to do, is costing us and our country dearly. And the question we've got to then ask ourselves, if it's not working, will we find a better way? And the answer to that I came to is yes. I went to the United Nations last year. I didn't manage to stop it or close it down or anything else, right? Just to let you know I'm fallible. Gee, there's some funny stories about that, I could tell you. Anyway, I went there and over the course of 3 months I had, another period of what I'm going to call solitude, because no one would talk to me at the United Nations. And it's not far from the truth. And during one moment, I rang my wife and I merely said to her, darling, I cannot keep doing what I'm going to do, what I'm doing. I don't want to be the rebel, the maverick. I don't want to be the person who is always reminding the party, or my chosen party, about what they're doing wrong. They shouldn't have to be reminded that they're meant to stand for smaller government and lower taxes. They're meant to protect and defend families. They're meant to stand for outcomes rather than just gestures. And so if I'm not prepared to do that, I've got 2 choices. One is I can leave. I can leave and go back to business and enjoy all the accoutrements that come with having a blessed life. Or I said I can do something different. I can start a political party. I said, what do you think I should do? And she knows me pretty well after 21 years of marriage. And she said, Cory, if you leave, you will regret it for the rest of your life. She said, because you will sit there and someone will do what you think you need to do, and they will do it not as well, and you will sit there going, I should have done that. And she said, you are the crankiest bloke I know now. I'm not going to live with you any crankier. And I said, so you think I should do it? And she says, yes. And I said, but what happens if it doesn't work? And she said, who cares? She says, you will regret it more if you don't give it a go. And at that moment, even though we were 15,000 kilometres away from each other, it was like a weight had lifted off my shoulders. It was then and there that I resolved that I would start a new political party, not knowing how it was going to end, not knowing whether anyone was going to follow me, but I felt free and liberated. And that's not to say it didn't get more difficult as it came closer to the time. That video you saw there, it almost choked me up again because it was so painful. It was so painful, it was such an extraordinary decision, but it was one that I thought I had to take because I think Australia deserves a fresh new approach. And the reality of what we're facing is this. Public confidence in politicians, political parties, in your elected office bearers is at almost an all-time low. About 30% of people are not voting for the Labor Party or the Liberal Party. They are looking around for any alternative. And some of those alternatives are really not in our national interest. There are some that every time they open out their mouth, it costs the taxpayers $4 or $5 or $10 billion. There are some, every time they open their mouth, it costs the Parliament every ounce of credibility that it ever had. But we can't afford to abandon the people who are looking for an alternative. And if I'm going to be critical of, people's decisions to vote for alternatives, whether it be Palmer or Xenophon or Lambie or Hinch or Lionhelm or Hanson or any of those others on the crossbench, you can't be critical of people if they want something different unless you are prepared to provide something as well. And so I said this to the Prime Minister. I said, Prime Minister, I know you're going to hate this decision. It was probably less temperate than what it is now. I know you're not going to like this decision, but it's a decision that in the long term, I hope you will recognise is good for this country. Because if those people are not coming back to the Liberal Party or the Labor Party, and they're going to be seeking out alternatives, it's incumbent upon us to provide them with one that is credible, one that is principled, and one that is going to advocate and stick up for the things that matter. And right now, the only party that is offering that is the Australian Conservatives. And one of the differences between this party, which is your party, it's not my party. It's not called the Bernardi Party, although that's really cool, I reckon. It's not called that. It's not named after me. It's named after you. It's named after Australian Conservatives, the forgotten people, the people who feel marginalised in their own country because they're not allowed to talk about the things that have established and built this country. They're not allowed to talk about the traditions, the lived experience upon which Western society and culture has developed. And that's why people want to come to this country. Because we have the best way of life, we have the best system of government, we have the greatest set of values, and yet we're allowing them to be usurped and replaced because of the tyranny of political correctness. We've got to say no longer. And so I started a platform. But the platform is not for me. I'm simply a megaphone. I'm in a privileged position where I can voice your concerns in the public square and make enough noise that they're listened to. Maybe not followed, but they're listened to. But it is incumbent upon all of us now that we have this privileged position, and I say we, to use it wisely. And it means that we are going to fight the election battle after election battle after election battle. And if all things go well, we will have the opportunity to have the balance of power in some state and federal, maybe even federal governments. But we've got lots of fights to do before that. And we're not going to win them all. But what we can do is make the others pay attention. Because every single time we contest a battleground and we influence the outcome, when we remind those in safe Liberal seats that they cannot win those seats without Australian Conservative preferences, when we remind those in safe Labor seats that they cannot win those seats unless they are going to be gaining Australian Conservative preferences, we remind those major parties about how strong our voice is. And if we do that, and we do it in a principled and consistent manner, we will get better governments as a result of us, whether we form them or not. And that is incumbent upon the energy and outcome of all of us. The fact that you've turned up here tonight, on a Wednesday night. It's a lovely warm evening in Melbourne. A lovely warm evening, and the fact that you've turned up shows how strong we are. It is extraordinary. The Liberal Party would give its eye teeth to have this many people turn up to any meeting at all. But the path forward, and this is what I'd like to share with you now, the path forward is going to be a challenging one. We are not the old school parties. We have the benefit, I guess, of saying, if we're starting a new party, what would we do? And so we're trying to do things a little differently. And that's, and I want to talk to you briefly about our future plans, how we're hoping you can be involved, and then I'm absolutely happy to take as many questions as I possibly can in the time that Rachel allows. There are no... And I'll say this, there are no questions off limits. You can ask whatever you like. You might not like the answer you get, but you can ask whatever you like. And I'll be as straight and direct with you as I possibly can. But our party is going to take advantage of technology. All of you are members of the political party. You have the ability to communicate with the party, and we want to make sure that it is as decentralised as is possible. And that means that we're encouraging people to organise, self-organise if you will, supporter groups. We will facilitate that through a website, our new website, which is coming out next week. And we want to ensure that you have all the resources, all the information you require to make us a strong and competitive political force. And so that means the mission here in Victoria is to build the resources, both human and financial, prepare for election campaigns for whenever they may occur, and so that we can coordinate ourselves to really shape election outcomes. And that is the goal and the focus of your state executive. It's all good and well to, want to get together and go through minutes and write things and all that sort of stuff, but ultimately it's action that counts for everything. And so for those of you who are expecting old branch meetings or, your regular monthly meeting and stuff, it's up to you to organise it. We will give you the tools, we will give you the technology, we will give you a say on our policy, we will give all of you a say in our pre-selection system and our process, because we want you to be involved. This is your party. And we need your input, but it's going to be different if you've been a member of a political party once before, because it's not going to be top-down dictatorships. It's about empowering grassroots people to do what they can, to act responsibly, to act like adults. Now, in respect to that, I just want to talk about pre-selections because obviously, a party lives or dies by its electoral success, and that depends in many respects on candidates. We don't know how many seats we're going to contest. We don't know where we're going to have success. We can only guess and plan and do the best that we possibly can. But what we're going to do is encourage people to complete candidate nomination forms so that they can express interest in representing the party. They will go into a pool of people. We will go through them, a group of individuals to select, a range of people for various seats based on demographics and, other criteria. And then we will put those candidates to our membership in that area. So every member in a particular area will have a vote and a say on who the candidate is going to be there. And that's because I want them to be your candidates. We need to vet them to make sure that none of them really believe Elvis is living next door to them. Or, as one man said to me the other day, he's the only one in Australia without a heartbeat, which is rather unique. So we need to go through those. Has anyone else not got a heartbeat? Kevin, I think you've got a new name. I always wanted a friend called Frank. So we need to go through that process so we can avoid the mistakes that other start-up parties have made. We want to do this better. We want to do it more professionally. We're not going to make mistakes. We are going to make mistakes, make no bones about that. But if we work together, we will achieve amazing things. And working together means different things to different people. But let me tell you, anyone that's been in a partnership, whether it be a business or a relationship, knows that allies don't always agree. There are small elements of disagreement that emerge in any group of individuals, whether it be 2 of them or 2,000 of them. The question for all of us is, how pure do we want to be? Because you disagree with Cory on one thing, I love talking about myself in the third person. Because you disagree with me about one thing or 2 things, does that mean this is not the party for you? And the answer to that is no. If you want to get involved in politics, you've got to look and consider which party represents your values, which party represents your principles to the greatest extent it possibly can. And we should be using our differences, our unique gifts, our skills and our talents as a source of strength rather than division. And only we, as a group, as individuals, can control how we respond to the challenges that are going to come our way. Because I know in this room there will be people that will have different views on social issues, on economics, on cultural issues, on constitutional issues. Now, I happen to think mine are right. My wife doesn't always agree, so she's right. But, you know, this is what we're facing as a political party. We're not always going to agree. We're just not. But this is the party for people that are united by a particular window on the world. It is a window built around the lived human experience that we see further, as Burke said, because of, you know, we stand on the shoulders of our ancestors. It is a pact between, you know, those who have lived, those who are living, and those who are yet to live. That is what we are trying to protect and preserve for ourselves, our way of life, but also for our children and their children. And so let's be mindful of that in every decision that we make. And the window upon which we view the world was outlined before. It is about limiting the size and scope and reach of government. Because a government that can do everything for you can take it all away from you as well. And government decision-making, you all admitted you didn't trust them. Government decision-making tends to favour governments rather than the citizenry. It is about supporting stronger families. Because if you've got stronger families, you can do with less government. It is the nursery of our children. And I mean that not just in the literal sense, but in every social aspect of their lives. It is where you learn to kick and be kicked. You learn to love and be scolded. You learn to suck it up, princess, in our family, right? And you learn to dish it out on occasions too. You learn about the art of compromise, the negotiation, about living with others. It is the building block of our civilization. We're united by a view that free enterprise is actually good. And you think about that for a moment. How does free enterprise get maligned in a country like Australia? I will do better as a business person by satisfying your needs and your wants more fully than they are currently. Because by giving you what you want, you'll give me more success. My success means I can employ more people, I can create more jobs, I can invest more in infrastructure, I can pay more tax. Nothing will beat that system. Nothing has anywhere in the world. And, you know, it was only a few years ago people were celebrating Venezuela as the great socialist way forward. It's astounding, but there was a dozen senators and members of parliament that invited Hugo Chavez to come to Australia to lecture them on modern socialism. He didn't come. But, you know, this is the battle that we're facing. We have to defend that. And then importantly, we do have to defend civil society. It is the way we interact with each other. And that is built upon some values and traditions which I hold very dear. And I hope you do too. Now, those values and traditions are rooted undoubtedly in faith, the Judeo-Christian tradition. And I make no apologies for that. I will not apologise or seek to put forward moral relativism or cultural relativism. because the evidence is to the contrary. And I know there are a great many people in this room who are of strong faith. And there are a great many people here who perhaps don't have any particular religious faith. And that's okay too. What's important is that we have faith in our institutions, that we have faith in each other. And those institutions and the relationships we have between each other is built around shared values. You expect to know how someone's going to greet you in the street, how they're going to treat you when in a business relationship or a personal relationship, that people are going to be courteous and nice. They're going to extend what I would call the ethic of reciprocity, which is, common in the Judeo-Christian tradition, but it's not common in many others. And that's given us our great way of life in this country. And anyone that says, it doesn't matter who's allowed in here or that we can divest ourselves of essential and enduring principles in favour of others is fooling themselves. Lenin called them useful idiots. I just call them fools. And so in respecting and rebuilding civil society, we will rebuild our own society. We will strengthen it. We are the counterculture movement of the time. And it is important to celebrate that and to fight just as hard as anyone else has to make sure that conservatism, as an ideology, as a belief system, as a way of looking at the world, has its rightful place in our society. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to, before I take questions, Rachel's going to supervise that. There's one other thing I'd like to say, is I'm enthused so greatly about the level of young people's interest in the Australian Conservatives. It is a great slogan, but to say we're the counterculture movement, I mean, imagine, you're a teenager, you can outrage your parents, not by smoking dope and being a hippie, by saying, I'm a conservative. And being now referred to officially as middle-aged, I don't understand what my own children talk about sometimes. But, I was approached a few weeks ago by a couple of people, young people, Callum and Kagan, who met together by being members of Australian Conservatives. And they asked for a meeting with me, and I met with them a few weeks ago. And they said, well, look, we really think that the youth need to be engaged and involved in the party, and we should have a youth wing of the party. And I said, fine, that's great. You come up with some ideas, tell us how you think it's going to work. And sure enough, they did. Young people actually delivering on something in the time frame in which they were asked to do. So I was impressed, right? So the young AC is about to be born. But I want to look, I see the two of them up there, and I want to say thank you. Stand up, and Callum and Kagan, two young people. Who should give us all hope for the future. And there are so many more like them around the country, and they are going to be embraced, they are going to be inspired, they are going to be enthused, and I hope that you will show them every bit of support every step of the way. Thank you, guys. And look at my watch, I've spoken for far longer than I'm meant to, and I'm getting that wind-up call. I want to say thank you again. God bless you all. I appreciate you being here. We have a mighty job ahead of us, but it's one that I relish, and I'm so glad that you want to be part of it too. Thank you.